The crimson dust of Kepler 442b swirled around Naya's feet as she stumbled down the main thoroughfare of Haven's Rest. Her bioluminescent markings, once proud symbols of her people's heritage, now pulsed weakly beneath her tattered clothing, a beacon that marked her as different, unwanted alien. The twin suns cast harsh shadows between the prefabricated buildings, and each shadow seemed to hide another pair of hostile human eyes. 3 days without food. 2 nights sleeping in the maintenance tunnels beneath the settlement. Her people's colony ship had been destroyed in the war 6 months ago, and the few survivors scattered across human worlds like seeds on barren ground. Most hadn't taken root. Neither had she, it seemed. The smell of fresh bread drifted from Martinez's bakery, making her empty stomach clench with desperate hunger. She pressed her face against the reinforced glass window, watching humans inside laugh and share meals with an ease she envied. When the baker noticed her, his expression soured instantly. He shouted something she couldn't hear through the glass, but his gestures were clear enough. Move along. Your kind isn't welcome here. At the employment office, the clerk barely looked up from his datapad. Nothing for your species. Try the outer settlements. But there were no outer settlements within walking distance, and she had no credits for transport. The recycling center manager took one look at her elongated fingers and shook his head. Those claws would damage the sorting equipment. Her fingers weren't claws. They were simply longer than human digits, evolved for delicate underwater work on her ocean world. Explaining felt pointless. The residential district proved even crueler. She knocked on doors offering to clean, to garden, to do any menial task that might earn her a meal. Each door opened with hope and closed with rejection. We don't hire aliens. Find your own kind. You're making the children nervous. One woman called security before Naya could even speak. As the afternoon wore on, desperation crept into her voice like poison. Her words became more pleading, more broken. At a modest home near the industrial sector, she found herself on her knees, begging a middle-aged man to give her any work at all. He stared down at her with disgust, as if her very presence contaminated his doorstep. Please, she whispered, her pride finally cracking. I have nothing left. No family, no home. If you won't give me work, I can offer other services. The words tasted like ash in her mouth, but starvation had a way of burning through dignity. The man's eyes widened with shock and revulsion. He slammed the door so hard the frame shook, leaving her alone on the doorstep with her shame. Night fell quickly on Kepler 442b, and the settlement's lights flickered on like cold stars. Naya walked the empty streets aimlessly, her bioluminescent markings now dim with exhaustion. At the settlement's edge, where the buildings gave way to the harsh wilderness beyond, she spotted a small repair shop. Warm light spilled from its windows, and she could see a figure bent over some mechanical device inside. This would be her last attempt. If this door closed, like all the others, she would walk into the wilderness and let Kepler 442b's toxic storms claim her. There would be dignity in that choice, at least. She raised her trembling fist and knocked. Tobias Chen had been expecting the knock. He'd seen the alien woman through his workshop window 20 minutes ago, standing at the edge of the light, like a lost spirit. He'd watched her gather courage, approach, then retreat again. Now as her soft knocking finally came, he set down his plasma welder and wiped grease from his scarred hands. The door opened to reveal a creature more fragile than he'd expected. Bioluminescent markings flickered like dying stars, and her large, dark eyes held the kind of hollow desperation he recognized from his own mirror during the worst nights of the war. When she spoke, offering work and services he'd rather not think about, something in her broken voice reminded him of the Centauri, civilians he'd failed to save during the siege of New Barcelona. Get inside, he said quietly. Her shock was palpable. Every other door had slammed shut. His remained open. She hesitated, clearly expecting a trap, but hunger and exhaustion finally drove her across his threshold. The workshop smelled of metal polish and recycled air, its walls lined with salvaged ship parts and half-repaired atmospheric processors. It wasn't much, but it was warm and safe. Have you eaten today? He asked, already knowing the answer. Her thin frame and the way she swayed on her feet told the story clearly enough. He retrieved a protein bar from his emergency supplies and placed it on his workbench. Eat. She devoured it like someone who'd forgotten what food tasted like. Tobias watched quietly, remembering his own hunger during the 3-day siege when supplies ran out. He'd been a military engineer then, responsible for keeping life support systems running while plasma bombs fell like rain. He'd saved hundreds of lives and lost thousands more. The math never balanced. You don't have to offer yourself, he said when she'd finished eating. Her shame was written in every line of her posture. Not to me. Not to anyone. Then why? Whispered. Why help me when everyone else? Because I know what it's like to have nowhere left to go. He turned back to his workbench, uncomfortable with the gratitude in her eyes. You can start tomorrow. Sweeping, organizing parts. Basic. Cleaning. It's not charity, I genuinely need help. Haven't had time to properly maintain this place since I mustered out. He showed her to a small cot behind a partition, originally meant for long repair jobs that required overnight attention. It wasn't luxurious, but it was private and warm. She curled up on it like a wounded animal, finding its first safe den in years as Tobias worked late into the night, calibrating a moisture reclamation unit. I found himself glancing at the partition. Soft, alien breathing mixed with the hum of his equipment. Outside, Haven's Rest slept peacefully, citizens comfortable in their prejudices and their certainty. That they were the heroes of humanity's expansion into the stars. He thought about Lieutenant Morrison, old squad mate who'd died trying to evacuate Centauri refugees. Morrison would have laughed at the irony to Tobias helping an alien when he'd spent 3 years fighting them. But the war was over, and some battles were worth fighting even in peacetime. Tomorrow, word would spread that he'd taken in an alien worker. The whispers had probably started already. Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store had excellent vision and a better sense for gossip. Mayor Hendricks would hear about it within days, and that conversation wouldn't be pleasant. But tonight, for the first time in months, the workshop didn't feel quite so empty. Tobias finished his calibrations and prepared for whatever storm was coming. He'd weathered worse during the war. At least this time, he was fighting for something that mattered. Mayor Harrison Hendricks prided himself on running the cleanest, most efficient human settlement on Kepler 4 to be. No crime, no unrest, no problems that couldn't be solved with the right combination of firm leadership and strategic ignorance. Was why the reports about Chin's repair shop made his morning coffee taste like acid. She's been there a week now, Mrs. Patterson said, settling her considerable bulk into the chair across from his desk. Working openly like she belongs here. My grandson saw her fixing an air recycler yesterday, using those claws of hers on delicate equipment. Hendricks pulled up Chen's file on his desktop display. Former military engineer, exemplary service record, kept to himself since mustering out. No history of political activism or alien sympathies, which made this situation all the more puzzling. Has anyone else hired alien workers? He asked. Absolutely not. Everyone knows better. Patterson's voice carried the satisfied tone of someone reporting neighborhood heresy. To talk, if Chen can do it, why can't we? That sort of dangerous thinking. Through his office window, Hendricks could see the settlement's main square, where human children played while their parents conducted business in an orderly, civilized manner. Haven's Rest was supposed to be humanity's shining beacon in this. Sector-proof, that humans could tame hostile worlds through superior organization and will. Alien contamination threatened that carefully maintained image. By afternoon, a delegation had formed outside his office. Shop owners, concerned parents, settlement council members. Their complaints varied, but the underlying message was clear. The alien had to go. She's undercutting human workers, complained Jackson from the electronics shop. Works for food and shelter while honest humans need proper wages. My children are afraid to walk past Chen's shop, added Dr. Walsh from the Medical Center. They can see those unnatural markings glowing through the windows. Hendricks listened patiently, then activated his desktop communicator. Chen, report to my office immediately. Tobias arrived within the hour, his work clothes still smudged with lubricant, his expression carefully neutral. He'd expected this. Summons had probably been preparing for it all week. Good. It meant he understood the situation's gravity. Tobias, you're a valued member of this community, Hendricks began carefully. Your military service, your technical skills, we're grateful to have you here. Which is why I'm confused about your recent staffing decisions. I needed help. She needed work. Simple economics, Mayor? Nothing about aliens is simple. Hendricks leaned forward. You know our policies. Haven's Rest is a human settlement. We've worked too hard building something clean and safe to compromise it now. She's not compromising anything. She's an excellent worker, careful, dedicated, grateful for the opportunity. The delegation murmured disapprovingly. Patterson's voice cut through the noise, grateful until her kind decides to take over. That's how it always starts. Hendricks raised his hand for silence. Tobias, I'm not ordering you to dismiss her yet, but I am strongly advising it. For your own good, as much as the community's, people are starting to avoid your shop. Bad for business, bad for community cohesion. And if I refuse, then you'll discover that business licenses require annual renewal. Health inspections become more frequent. Safety compliance reviews get very thorough. Hendricks kept his voice mild, almost friendly. I'd hate to see a war hero lose everything over misguided charity. Tobias met his gaze steadily. I'll take that under advisement. After he left, the delegation lingered, unsatisfied with the measured response. Their muttering filled the office like the buzz of angry insects, and Hendricks realized his careful political solution had pleased no one. Chen would probably ignore the warning the alien would remain, and public pressure would continue building. Sometimes leadership required harder choices than diplomatic suggestions. Myra Vasquez was grading arithmetic tests when the shouting started. Through her classroom window, she could see a crowd gathering in Haven's Rest's main square, their voices rising with each passing minute. At the center of the commotion stood Tobias, Chen, and the alien woman everyone had been whispering about for 2 weeks. The girl, for despite her otherworldly features, she seemed hardly older than Mira's teenage student, stood, pressed against Tobias's side, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with what looked like fear. Around them, at least 30 settlers formed an increasingly hostile circle. This is getting out of hand, Mira muttered, abandoning her desk to get a better view. Mayor Hendricks stood on the administrative building's front steps, flanked by 2 settlement security officers. He wasn't actively participating in the confrontation, but his presence legitimized it. Classic political cowardice: let the mob do your dirty work, then claim you tried to maintain order. You're harboring an enemy of humanity, shouted Rivera from the supply depot. How many good humans died fighting her kind? She's not a soldier, Tobias replied, his voice carrying clearly across the square. She's a refugee. Her people's colony was destroyed in the war by our ships. The crowd's anger intensified at this reminder. Jackson pushed forward, his face flushed with rage. Good. They started the war. They get what they deserve. The war is over, Tobias said firmly. We won. That means we get to choose who we become next. Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through the noise like a rusty blade. We choose to stay human. We choose to protect our children from alien influence. Mira watched the alien woman Naya. She'd heard Tobias call her shrink further into herself. The girl's fear was palpable, her large eyes darting between hostile faces like a trapped animal seeking escape. But there was nowhere to run. The crowd had surrounded them completely. Get her out of here, Chen, Mayor Hendricks finally spoke up. Send her to the wilderness camps where she belongs. This is a human settlement. No, Tobias's voice carried the same inflexible tone Mira had heard from veterans discussing principles they'd died for. She stays. She works. She's earned that right. The crowd surged forward slightly, and Mira saw terror flash across Naya's features. The girl was remembering other mobs, other moments when her people had faced human hatred. This was how genocides began, not with government orders, but with ordinary people convincing themselves that cruelty was justified. Myra thought about her students, half of whom she'd taught to read, all of whom she'd taught to think. What would they learn from watching their teachers stand silently while a crowd terrorized a refugee? What kind of adults would they become? Before she could lose her nerve, she walked outside and pushed through the crowd.
Ah!
"What exactly are you people doing?" she demanded, her teacher's voice cutting through the noise. "Standing around yelling at a girl who weighs maybe 40 kilos soaking wet?" "Stay out of this, Mira," Patterson warned. "This doesn't concern the school. Everything that happens in this community concerns the school. I teach your children, remember? What am I supposed to tell them when they ask why their parents formed an angry mob?" "You'll tell them we protected them from alien contamination," Jackson snapped. "Contamination?" Mira laughed harshly. "She fixes broken machines and sweeps floors. If that's contamination, half your equipment must be compromised by now." She walked over to stand beside Tobias and Naya, feeling the crowd's hostility refocus on her. Her hands were shaking, but her voice remained steady. "Anyone who wants to threaten her has to go through me first." The square fell silent, except for the wind whistling through the prefab buildings. Mira could hear her own heartbeat, could feel 30 pairs of angry eyes weighing her words. Behind her, she sensed Naya's surprise and gratitude. "You're making a mistake, Miss Vasquez," Mayor Hendricks said quietly. "A career-ending mistake." "Maybe," Mara replied, "but it's my mistake to make." 1 year later, Mira stood in the same square where the confrontation had nearly torn Haven's Rest apart. But instead of an angry mob, families from a dozen different species were setting up booths for the settlement's first Founders' Day celebration. Human children chased Altarian youngsters around the fountain while their parents discussed trade agreements and cultural exchanges. The transformation hadn't been immediate or easy. After Mira's public stand, the community had fractured into opposing camps. Some families relocated to more traditional settlements. Others, inspired by the teacher's courage, began questioning their own prejudices. The real change came 3 months later, when a massive atmospheric processor failure threatened the entire settlement. Naya had worked for 18 straight hours alongside Tobias and the maintenance crews, her elongated fingers perfect for reaching damaged components in tight spaces. Her bioluminescent markings had provided light when their equipment failed, and her knowledge of biotechnology common among her aquatic people had suggested an innovative solution that saved both the settlement and thousands of credits in replacement costs. It was hard to maintain hatred for someone who'd literally kept you breathing. "Miss Vasquez," voice called out across the square. Mira turned to see David Patterson, Mrs. Patterson's grandson, running toward her with a datapad in his hands. The boy had been among her most reluctant students the year before, infected by his grandmother's prejudices. Now he served as the settlement's youngest official translator, fluent in 3 alien languages. "Naya wants to know if you need help setting up the education booth," he said, slightly out of breath. She finished the repair demonstrations early. Mira looked across the square to where Naya was patiently explaining atmospheric recycling to a group of fascinated children. The former refugee had become one of Haven's Rest's most valued technical specialists, and her calm demeanor made her a natural teacher. The fear that had haunted her eyes for so long had been replaced by quiet confidence. "Tell her I'd love the help," Mira replied. "And David, I'd ask if she'd consider guest lecturing in my xenobiology classes next semester." The boy ran off to relay the message. Myra reflected on how much had changed. Mayor Hendricks had been voted out of office 6 months ago, replaced by Dr. Walsh, the same woman who'd once complained about her children's fear of Naya's markings. Tobias's repair shop had expanded into a full technical institute, training both human and alien engineers. Mrs. Patterson still grumbled about the way things used to be, but even she admitted the settlement's economy had never been stronger. Not every story had a happy ending. Some prejudices ran too deep, some fears too ancient. But Haven's Rest had proven that communities could change, that courage was contagious, and that sometimes all it took was one person willing to open their door when everyone else kept theirs closed. As the twin suns set over Kepler 4 for to be, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Mira watched Naya teaching a mixed group of children how to repair a water purifier. The alien woman's bioluminescent markings pulsed gently in the gathering. Dusk, no longer a beacon of difference, but a reminder of the beauty that diversity could bring. The last hope's echo had become a song of transformation, rippling outward to touch lives across the galaxy. And in a small repair shop at the edge of town, an old cot remained ready for the next refugee who might need shelter from the storm. Because some doors once opened, never truly close again.